And thanks for watching Morning Live. Now, the National Prosecuting Authority, that's the NPA, wants autonomy from the Department of Justice. It wants to operate more like a Chapter 9 institution, such as the Public Protector's Office or that of the Auditor-General, and to account directly to Parliament. Now, the NPA says that this will also avoid political interference, as the Prosecuting Authority was used as a political tool in the past. The head of the NPA raised these issues with Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice earlier in the month, as the Constitution does not currently provide for an independent prosecuting authority. Sipho Ngwema is the spokesperson for the NPA, and he joins us now to discuss this further. Mr. Ngwema, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, guys, and thanks for having us on the program.
Mr. Ngwema, firstly, when the NPA now talks about autonomy from the Department of Justice, and there's a tacit admission there of political interference in the past. If that political interference is something that is of a bygone era, that belongs in the past, why does the NPA want autonomy now?
Thank you, Sakina. You must remember what all of us have to do going forward is to avoid what has happened in the past. And that must not depend on the individuals that are there occupying office. You may not have that problem now because you have people who believe in the Constitution and the values of what South Africa stands for, but you will never know what happens in 10 and 15 and 25 years. And if you are committed to addressing what would have happened in the past, you really have to look at some of the things that then affect the way you had to take decisions, affect the way you had to make sure that your decisions are without fear, without favor, and without influence. And therefore, as you craft a new way of going forward for generations to come, you have to look at the best solution in order to avoid what has happened in the past.
So, speak to us a little bit more about what exactly happened in the past, Mr. Ngwema, because there were allegations leveled at various stages, at various instances of political interference in the NPA. But perhaps this is a good opportunity, as you are now asking for autonomy, to take South Africa into your confidence and tell us exactly the sort of political interference that was brought to bear on the NPA in the past.
Firstly, you will be aware that there are a number of commissions that have investigated various leaders of the NPA at various times. And most of those, in the end, some of the leaders were forced to resign, some were fired, and none of the NPA National Directors of Public Prosecution have ever finished their term. They all leave midway, and then there are controversies around the decisions that they take. But also you would know that there's been appointments that were reversed by the courts because those people were not deemed fit and proper, or they were not rational decisions. And in order to avoid all those things and to make sure that going forward, because even now there are issues that are raised around decisions taken by some of the prosecutors already still in the National Prosecuting Authority, and there are processes underway to deal with that, to make sure that people do account for decisions that they have taken. So history is littered with all those examples where there were differences between the executive and members of the NPA, but also where there are allegations that there were decisions of the NPA that were influenced by the executive. And if you want to avoid that, everything that is NPA must be consistent with the principle of independence, so that there is no prejudice or influence when it takes its decisions.
I just think it's absolutely weird, and it's a very serious indictment on those who work in the NPA who allowed themselves to be used like that, I would say, Mr. Ngwema, because are we going to solve these issues by putting policies in place, by actually getting autonomy for the NPA? Are the problems not bigger? Are these not problems of integrity of those who actually are tasked with carrying out the work that the NPA is mandated with?
Undoubtedly, and the NPA is looking into those things by setting up an integrity office, which is going to be in the National Director of Public Prosecutions, which is going to deal with the issues that you are raising. So we are finding solutions for all the issues that we identifying as problems that have contributed to the situation in the NPA. What is key to the independence one is to say, but there are external influences as well that we need to deal with, that to make sure that in order for the NPA to be credible, in order for the NPA to be an accountable institution that is transparent and people of South Africa understand the decisions that it takes are consistent with the facts before it, we need to make sure that there's a degree of independence that goes and is consistent with the prescripts of the Constitution. And therefore, this is part of a number of solutions that we're looking at as we re-engineer the organization going forward.
Still not understanding exactly how autonomy or a greater degree of independence from the Department of Justice is going to deal with that human element where people are just found wanting in terms of their morals and integrity. But explain to us, Mr. Ngwema, when the NPA says that it wants to operate more independently from the Department of Justice and wants to escape the influence of state capture, as it were, specifically how exactly would you envision it to work better?
You must remember, besides the NPA having the obligation in terms of its mandate to take its prosecutorial decisions independently, there are issues around administration and finance. And you must remember the NPA doesn't have an accounting officer. The accounting officer is in the Department of Justice. There are certain senior positions of the NPA have to be approved by the executive. And hypothetically, if you were to have differences with whatever administration, with regards to cases, with regards to many other things, you must remember those areas of human resources and finance and administration can be affected. One of the problems that we've had over the past decade or so is that the NPA has not been receiving the budget that it's supposed to receive. It has been weakened. And we're not sure whether or not that was deliberate, but of course, as you are an institution in South Africa, we may not have escaped what has happened in the past 10 years. So to avoid those things, to make sure that the NPA reports to Parliament, which is a multi-party institution, which is transparent, like many other institutions, as you correctly said in Chapter 9. So even the NPA has to be accountable, but it has to account to a structure that is much more diverse and has much more oversight powers in terms of the Constitution, rather than it's subjected to the executive, which may be conflicted many times.
So the Constitution does not currently provide for an independent prosecuting authority, Mr. Ngwema. What would have to happen? What is the process that would have to unfold in order to make that a reality?
Of course, there are certain legislative changes that have to take place, and this is the interaction that we are having with the relevant stakeholders, because issues of accountability for accounting officer, they have to do with issues of PSMA and other relevant legislation that may have to be revisited if all of us are on the same page with regards to how we see the future of the NPA.
And has the NPA engaged the Minister of Justice at all about this? And if so, what has the response been from the Minister?
Those discussions are taking place, and I must emphasize the fact that there is universal understanding and acknowledgement that the independence of and the autonomy of the NPA is imperative. And there are discussions that are taking place in terms of what the NPA has suggested, the practicalities thereof. So those discussions are taking place as we speak, and we'll see how they finalize.
Mr. Ngwema, does the NPA still face attempts of political interference when it comes to prosecutions?
In terms of what is happening currently, no. There's a lot of support that we receive from all relevant stakeholders. But as I said, it's not about now. It's not about the personalities that occupy office today. It's to be able to foresee what may happen, have foresight of what may happen in 20, 30 years, where there may be different people occupying these positions. So now, no, and there's huge support for the initiatives of the NPA to make sure that It's not contaminated. It deals with the issues that had happened over the past 10 years, but also it's a credible and a professional organization that is able to perform its task without fear, without favor, and without prejudice.
So currently, the processes that are underway to basically give effect to this plea that you have made, how far are you with regard to that?
As I said, they are, and as you correctly pointed out in the beginning, that the National Director raised this issue in Parliament, which is a key institution in terms of policy and lawmaking. But also we are engaging with the counterparts and the Justice and the Ministry. So those discussions are taking place. So I cannot really preempt in terms of how are they going to go. But I think the final outcome of those discussions will be made known at the appropriate time.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Sipho Ngwema, spokesperson for the National Prosecuting Authority, talking to us about the NPA's proposal to act independently from the Department of Justice. And as you heard there, political interference, some budgetary issues being raised. So what are your views on that? Please let us know at Morning Live SABC. Let's take a break before